Okay. Okay, can you all see us clearly? One moment. Is it loud and clear? Okay, great. I just need some more tea and I can kill this. Who is Melchizedek according to scriptures? Hey, Mike, put some more of this in. Who was Melchizedek? Now, one issue concerning this particular teaching, excuse me. One issue concerning this particular teaching of Melchizedek is that, get you in here. One issue with this is you have brothers and sisters out there, some people teaching that Melchizedek is or was Christ. Some people teach that Melchizedek was an angel. You have others out there teaching that Melchizedek was some wise sorcerer and all. Because people don't know who Melchizedek is, it opens the area of theory for philosophers to come through with their, I would say, their science. You have Dr. York, who was bringing the teachings, the orders of Melchizedek, where he was bringing Egyptology. Some people say he was an Egyptian. We have the Israelites out there who are saying that Melchizedek was Christ, who came down. You have Christians who claim that Melchizedek was Christ. Who was Melchizedek? We're going to prove to you today. Who is Melchizedek? First of all, Melchizedek means king of peace. Now we know Christ is our king of peace. But was the original Melchizedek Christ? Let's see. Read Genesis 14 and start at the 17th verse.
Genesis chapter 14, verse 17. And the king of Sodom went out to meet him after his return from the slaughter of Kedorlaomer and of the kings that were with him, at the valley of Shavah, which is the king's dale.
Speaking to that.
And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine, and he was priest of the Most High.
So this Melchizedek in Genesis 14, number 1, was priest of the Most High. So he was the priest that taught Abraham how to serve the true God of all gods. Now we know this to be true because Abraham's father was an idolater. His name was Terah. I also know from the age when Abraham was born, according to the book of Jasher, that Nimrod seen his star in the heaven, knowing that the Savior would come through Terah's son, and wanted Terah to bring Abraham to be killed, similar to the story of Herod and Christ in the future. And see, Nimrod knew that his sons, Terah's sons, would eventually take down his sons in the future. We know that not only was Nimrod Cush, Nimrod also had Nephilim blood within him. So, Terah, being afraid to give up his son to be slaughtered by the king Nimrod, Terah gave his son to Noah. And Noah gave him to Shem to learn the way of the God who destroyed the earth through the flood. And for 10 years, he trained Abraham up to learn the ways of the true Most High God. He was Abraham's priest, and I'm going to prove it. At that time, there was no separation between king and priest. The king followed the Most High at this time. Later on, as the children of Israel were beginning to become a nation, that title was split, where Judah would be king and Levi would be priest. But that wasn't the original order. The original order was the king should be the priest too. Christ came in that original order before it was split between Judah and Levi. Let's prove that. Read Genesis 14 and 18 on through 20. Read.
Genesis chapter 14, verse 18. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine.
Go ahead.
And he was the priest of the Most High.
He was the priest of the Most High. Read.
And he blessed them and said, Blessed be Abram of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be the Most High God, which have delivered thine enemies into thy hand.
Go ahead.
And he have made him tithes of all. And he gave him tithes of all.
And he gave him tithes of all. For those who say that the tithing is done away with in Moses have no understanding. Because the tithe in the law of tithe that was given to Levi was created and in the earth before there was any such thing as a Levitical priesthood. He gave him 10%. When Abraham took down the king of Sodom and all those other kings, he took 10% of his riches and gave it to the priests who taught him the ways of the Most High in appreciation. And when the Levitical priesthood was set up, they mimicked what was established in the Spirit. Now, how was this established in the Spirit? During Abraham's time, there was no law to say, give your priest 10%. But in appreciation, knowing what this man did for him, because without that God, he would not be able to take down those kings, he immediately gave 10% to the priests who showed him how to serve the true God. And see, that was done out of the Spirit opposed to the letter. All right? Now, he gave Melchizedek 10%. But see, when you read the scriptures, the Bible, Genesis is really a microcosm or an overview of many years. You really don't get any detailed information on who was Melchizedek, what was his role, why did Abraham honor him so? What was Melchizedek's role in society? Who was Melchizedek? All right? So, I will also prove that the book of Hebrews, which is Hebrews Canaans, who, when it comes to the book of Hebrews, they must have had knowledge of the book of Jasher to draft the Hebrew Canaans. The book of Hebrews is from the Hebrew Canaans of the Old Testament. They refer back to the Hebrew Canaans. That's why it's called Hebrews. So Hebrews had the knowledge of the book of Jasher, and I'm going to prove it. How do we know who Melchizedek was? It's simple. I need you to get Hebrews 6. Hebrews 7. And I need you to get the book of Jasher, the 16th chapter, which speaks of the same story that we read in Genesis 14. Got it?
Mm-hmm.
Read it.
Hebrews chapter 6.
Read 6 and 20.
Hebrews chapter 6, verse 20.
Go ahead.
Whether the forerunner is for us entered, even Yeshua, made an high priest forever after the order of Melchizedek.
After what?
After the order of Melchizedek.
It didn't say Christ was Melchizedek. He came after the order of Melchizedek. What was the order of Melchizedek? In which the king would be priest also. Opposed to the letter or the Levitical law, which means Judah would be king and Levi would be priest. Christ came after the original order that was established in the spirit under the covenant father Abraham. Okay? He came after that order. He wasn't the originator. He wasn't the person that actually did the order, but this was the order he would come in. Let's get Genesis 14. Before you get that, let's get Hebrews 7 and 1. Read.
Hebrews chapter 7 verse 1. For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High power.
So he was priest of the Most High God. Read.
Who met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings, and blessed him, to whom also Abraham gave a 10th part of all.
He gave him 10%. And that was before there was any such thing as Levi. And see, the disciples needed to teach the Hebrews this because they were trying to say that Christ was not worthy because he wasn't from the Levitical priesthood. They didn't think that he was worthy to be priest. And he said, listen, the disciples was teaching that there was an order established before Levi was born, in which the king was priest too. Read.
To whom also Abraham gave a 10th of all.
Go ahead.
First being by interpretation, king of righteousness.
So Hebrews is telling us two separate interpretations. First being interpreted, what?
King of righteousness. King
of righteousness. So there was an account before the king of Salem. Excuse me, the king of Salem. There was one account before then. First being interpreted what?
King of righteousness.
King of righteousness. And what came after that?
And after that also king
and after of Salem. That also king of what?
King of Salem.
King of Salem, which is king of peace. So there was an interpretation before the Genesis interpretation. First being interpreted king of righteousness, and afterwards king of Salem. So let's see if we can find that interpretation that was established before what we read in Genesis, the 14th chapter. I need you to go to the book of Jasher. The book of Jasher. And the only Jasher that you can get out of the original translation is a translation that came from J.H. Parry. All right? The book of Jasher, 16, 11, and 12. Read.
And Adonizedek.
No, matter of fact, read 16 and 10.
Jasher chapter 16 verse 10. And Bera king of Sodom and the rest of his men that were with him went from out of the line pits into which they had fallen to meet Abram and his men.
Same story we read in Genesis 14. Read.
And Adonizedek.
And Adonizedek. That's his name. Adonizedek. Read.
King of Jerusalem.
And Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem. Read.
The same was Shem.
The same was who?
The same was Shem.
The same was Shem. Now, when you look in the Hebrew, Adonizedek means king of righteousness. First being interpreted king of righteousness, and then afterwards king of Salem. So the book of Hebrews is telling us there's two separate interpretations of the same story that we read concerning Abram and his priest. Adonizedek, who was Shem, read,
went out with his men to meet Abram and his people with bread and wine.
Go ahead. And with bread and wine, the same story. Read.
And they remained together in the valley of Malach. And Adonizedek,
read,
blessed Abram, and Abram gave him a 10th from all that he had brought from the spoil of his enemies.
Common sense. Shem taught Abram the ways of the God of the Hebrews, and he gave Shem 10% in appreciation for being king and priest during the time of Abraham. cannot be disputed. And the Bible lets you know there's two separate interpretations. So you cannot understand Hebrews in the order of Melchizedek without the book of Jasher. Now, some people may say, well, when I read the book of Hebrews, it says that Melchizedek didn't have a father or mother. With all thy getting, get understanding. There was no father or mother that was established in the priestly institution like Levi. The mother and father under Levi had to be priests, and they had to be from the seed of Levi. It was no such law in which that was institutionalized during Shem's time. That's what it's speaking of, and I'm going to prove that. Read, go back to Hebrews.
Hebrews.
After first being interpreted.
Being by interpretation, king of righteousness.
Adonizedek.
And after that also, king of Salem.
Melchizedek.
Which is king of peace.
Go ahead.
Without father, without mother.
Why does it say without father or mother? That means without descent. Read.
Without descent, having neither beginning of days nor end of life.
There's a difference between Melchizedek and the Levitical priesthood. We can show you in the Old Testament where the priesthood began with Levi before the children of Israel went into the promised land. We can show you in Malachi where the priesthood ended. So there's a beginning and ending of the priesthood we see with Levi. That's what it means without mother or father or descent. Okay? You don't need to be of Levi, mother and father, to be king and priest, because Shem was not of Levi. Neither was Christ. Read.
Verse 3. Without father, without mother, without descent, having neither beginning of days nor end of life.
Beginning of days or end of life. I can show you the beginning when Levi became a priest, and I can show you in Malachi where he ended. Read.
But made like unto the Son of the Most High, abideth a priest continually. Now consider how great this man was, unto whom even the patriarch Abraham gave the tenth of the spoils.
How great was he? Read.
And verily they that are of the sons of Levi, who receive the office of the priesthood, have a commandment to the tithes of the people.
You see the comparison? So the comparison is the priesthood of Melchizedek against the priesthood of Levi. That's the comparison right there. Read.
Take tithes of the people according to the law, that is, of their brethren, though they came out of the loins of Abraham.
Though they came out of the loins of Abraham. So those brothers that was coming up to the disciples saying, well, hold up, y'all can't be priests. Y'all not Levi. The disciples were showing, well, listen, brother, there was a priesthood that was set up that was greater than the Levites. Before Levi was born, when Levi was in Abraham's loins, he gave 10% to a greater priest. Read.
But he whose descent is not counted from them received tithes from Abraham.
So Shem didn't receive, wasn't given tithes to Levi. So why should those in Christ? Read.
And blessed him that had the promises.
Go ahead.
And without all contradiction, the less is blessed of the better. And here men that die receive tithes, but there he receiveth them. But there he receiveth them, of whom it's witness that he liveth. And as I may say so, or so say, Levi also, who received tithes, pays tithes in Abraham.
So Levi himself, who received tithe, paid tithes himself. Why? Because when he was in Abraham's loins, Abraham gave 10% to his priests. So what the disciples were showing is, if this man Christ came after the original order, should not your priests who are here today pay to him? Read.
Verse 10. For he was yet in the loins of his father when Melchizedek met him.
Go ahead.
If therefore perfection were by the Levitical priesthood, for under it the people received the law, what further need was there that another priesthood should rise after the order of Melchizedek.
So if the old Levitical priesthood was perfect, what need was it that another priest should come after the order of Melchizedek? What is the order of Melchizedek? The same order that was during Abraham's time, in which the king would be priest. Christ fulfilled that order. That takes away from all these other theories of who Melchizedek was. Okay, he wasn't Christ who came down as an angel and took 10%. What do Christ need to be an angel and get 10% from Abraham for? What are you going to do with the 10%? And go back into heaven with the gold? So those theories are incorrect, saying that it was Christ. Other people use this for Melchizedekian magic, claim that Melchizedek was a sorcerer, because the information in Genesis does not go into the story in detail. They'll use that lack of information to bring forth theories. Melchizedek was Shem. His role, he taught Abraham the ways of the Most High because his father was an idolater. Simple? We hope you all receive that understanding. Okay, you can save that. You can stop and save that so I can let them know.